Welcome to US Tax Unpacked. Today we're unpacking one of the hottest issues in the headlines, tariffs. They sound like complicated trade policy, but in reality, tariffs are simply taxes. And in 2025, they're hitting American businesses and consumers harder than at any point in recent decades. Let's break down what tariffs are, how they work, and why they're often called a hidden tax on your everyday life. What are tariffs? At their core, tariffs are taxes placed on imported goods. When a U.S. business imports steel from China or avocados from Mexico, they pay a tariff at the border. But here's the key. That cost doesn't just stay with the importer. It usually gets passed down the supply chain to retailers and eventually to you, the consumer. That's why tariffs are often called a hidden tax. You may never see the tariff on your receipt, but you'll feel it in higher prices. In 2025, tariffs are back in the spotlight. U.S. tariff levels are now the highest in decades. They've been expanded far beyond traditional targets like steel or semiconductors. This year, tariffs are being applied to a broad range of consumer goods, from clothing and electronics to some food products. The biggest trade partners affected are China, Mexico, and Canada. That means almost every American household is now touched by tariffs in some way, whether it's your smartphone, your groceries, or your car. Who really pays? Technically, it's U.S. importers who pay tariffs at the border. But in practice, those costs don't stay there. Importers raise their prices to cover the tariff. Retailers then adjust their prices. And by the time that product reaches you, the cost has been baked into what you pay at the checkout. That's why tariffs are often compared to a regressive tax. Everyone pays more, regardless of income, but lower-income households feel it proportionally more. For businesses, tariffs can be devastating. Manufacturers face higher costs for parts and raw materials. Small businesses that rely on imported goods may see their margins squeezed or wiped out entirely. Some absorb the cost, others raise prices, and some are forced to cut jobs. And there's also retaliation. Trade partners often respond with tariffs of their own, making U.S. exports less competitive in global markets. For consumers, tariffs show up as higher prices on everyday goods. Electronics, clothing, even food products become more expensive. It's like an invisible form of inflation, one that families can't avoid. And while tariffs are framed as targeting foreign nations, the reality is that U.S. households shoulder most of the burden. So why do governments use tariffs if they cause so much pain at home? Three main reasons. First, to protect domestic industries and jobs, like U.S. steel or agriculture. Second, as leverage in trade disputes. Tariffs can bring countries to the negotiating table. And third, they generate revenue. In fact, tariff revenue in 2025 is expected to reach record levels. But many economists argue the long-term costs far outweigh the short-term gains. This is where the tax angle becomes clear. Tariffs are, at their core, just another form of tax. But unlike income tax, they don't scale with your ability to pay. Everyone pays the same higher price at the checkout. That means tariffs act like a regressive tax, hitting lower-income families harder. From a tax fairness perspective, that's a serious concern. Looking ahead, trade talks with Mexico and South Korea have stalled, and analysts are warning of possible tariff adjustments or even refunds. This uncertainty creates major headaches for businesses trying to plan ahead. For households, it means continued unpredictability in prices. The story of tariffs in 2025 is still being written. So, tariffs. They might sound like abstract international policy, but really they're a form of taxation, one that lands directly on American businesses and families. Understanding tariffs helps you see how global politics translates into local prices. Thanks for watching US Tax Unpacked. Subscribe for more fact-checked insights into how taxes, visible and hidden, shape your everyday life.